Hi folks. In this video, I'd like to talk to you about a topic that doesn't get a lot of discussion, at least not in my experience, and that is doing a painting in a square format. So one of the difficulties about doing a good painting on a square format is getting enough variety into the piece. You're already starting at a bit of a disadvantage in the sense that all four edges are the same length, not exactly conducive to variety. So how do we approach this and come up with something that's effective? I'm going to use this piece that I did recently at the Plein Air Convention and Expo in Santa Fe, New Mexico, as an example. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through a little bit of a dissection of it, a little behind the curtain sort of a look at how I designed this piece and the decisions that went into it. So let's get started. All right, as I've already said, it's a square format. In this case, this is a 12 by 12 painting. So what I want to avoid is putting a square within a square, okay? Because it's too symmetrical, it's just not very interesting. So let's bring our attention first to this adobe building. What you have here essentially are two rectangles, one overlapping the other. The other thing to note is that it starts out at this one edge, goes almost clear across the canvas, but not quite, to about right here. And then there's this little space here between the edge of the adobe and the edge of the painting. So what we have here is a long shape and then a short shape here. It's an asymmetric rhythm, very, very much conducive to the idea of variety. All right, you don't have equidistant spaces that would become static and boring. The next thing is, and this one was the key element in making this painting work, in my opinion. We have the square, we have the rectangles. This tree, which actually wasn't located where I have it in the painting, it was a bit off to the side and frankly out of the view of this scene. But I moved it in behind this building because it is, although not a perfect circle, it is definitely circular in nature. And that adds to the sense of variety. Square, rectangle, big dominant circle, okay? Not only is it a big dominant circle and a third shape that adds variety, but I deliberately moved it off center a bit. So having this offset shape, instead of having it right in the middle of the canvas, also makes it less static. Now the other thing that allows for is the introduction of a background cottonwood tree. Now this one, although it's really, the shape is actually more of a triangle than anything, but because it's obviously another cottonwood, you can tell by the color and its texture, but it's a second round shape, circular shape, or at least that's how our brain interprets it, okay? Because of this edge and because of its similarity to this here. So to repeat, we've got a square, we've got a rectangle, we've got a couple of circular shapes, or at least shapes the eye reads as circular. Let's move on to something we don't have, diagonals, or in this case, sort of wedge shapes. Now, this mountain in the background is somewhat obscured by the tree and by the building, and that's fine because you can tell here, the height of it here and the height of it here, that there's a slope involved. So that's a diagonal. And then a more subtle diagonal is created by the slope of this roof. Now, one of the things you can get away with these old buildings, especially old adobe buildings, is that they aren't always plumb, all right? So this roof is sloping back just a little bit, and it's a very slight diagonal, and it's in opposition to this diagonal of the ridge line back here in this mountain. So again, it adds variety, right? Anytime you have squares and rectangles, you have verticals and horizontals. We have a vertical here, we have a vertical here. And again, as I said, the edges of the canvas itself. So it's pretty much imperative to have some other diagonal somewhere in the painting just again to add variety to it. And I keep harping on that, but it's really important. Otherwise, the painting becomes repetitious and static if everything's right angles and perfectly square. It just doesn't work. So these are the main ideas here, is that I've taken a variety of different shapes and arranged them in a way where they're not centered, they're offset, which adds asymmetric rhythm to them. If you look at the space from here to here and then from here to here, they're not the same. And it's the same thing when you look at light and dark spaces up here. From this edge to the edge of the tree is not the same as from this edge of the tree to this edge of the tree. and then it's a much smaller space between here and here. So again, asymmetric rhythm. You don't have any equidistant, spaces. And then last, well, sorry, two things. The other diagonals that I have here, or at least implied diagonals, are these dark tree trunks. And again, they're opposing. They're not going the same direction. And I find that that makes it more interesting. And then last, there is a square within this big square, and it's, or at least something that's reminiscent of a square, and that's this window here. But it's pretty small. It's not in the center. The center of this canvas is right about here. Okay, so it's off from the center. And it's small enough that I don't believe that it's got a lot of graphic impact. It's not taking up a lot of visual attention. All in all, I think the arrangement of shapes and the shapes that I chose combined to make this a pretty effective painting. I just want you to understand, this is a landscape, but if this was a still life or a figurative piece, you could use the same processes. Find interesting shapes, arrange them in ways that it keeps it from being too symmetrical. Make sure there's variety in your shapes, and you're going to have a painting that, at least compositionally, is pretty successful. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other things that go into making a good painting, but composition it's pretty important. It's one of the foundational elements. So if you can get that off to the right start, you're in a good position to do a really good piece of artwork. So just wanted to take you behind the scenes a little bit and give you an idea of what the thought process is that goes into, in my process anyway, going into making what I think is a successful painting. Yeah, I hope you liked it. I hope you found what I had to say about it interesting. Sometimes dissecting a piece that worked is the best way to teach. So I hope that this is something you found useful. Remember, folks, it's a great, big, beautiful world out there. Get out and enjoy it. God bless.